Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Lina Tahan, and I'm an affiliated scholar at the University of Cambridge and one of the Nahrein Network visiting scholars, as well as a Chatham House researcher working on Iraq. I also work on Lebanon. This is my field of study, and mainly I deal with museum studies and heritage studies. It is a great pleasure today to introduce to you two of our speakers, um, Mr. Rashad Salim and Professor Nadia Al-Mudaffar Fawzi. I will start first with Professor Nadia, who's going to speak about a collision course between water, the environment, and culture in Mesopotamia. But I would like just to shortly introduce her before I give her the floor to speak. Professor Mudaffar is a marine scientist. She teaches at the University of Basra, where she holds the position of head of department of the biological development of Shatt al-Arab and the Northern Arabian Gulf. Her research is very much multidisciplinary, and she's very much interested in promoting this multidisciplinary approach and collaborating with Iraqi research group as well as international people. Before we start, just a few housekeeping things. Can I ask everyone attending to please mute their microphone so that we leave Professor Nadia to speak freely. And at the end of her talk, we will take questions in the chat bar that you have. So please feel free to write your questions. And based on each question coming, I will take them first. And there will be Dr. Mehyar helping me because I cannot monitor all the questions at all one time. That's all for me to say now. And I leave you to enjoy the two talks. Thank you.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes,
Okay.
Professor.
Good evening, everyone. And first, I would like to thank the Nahrein Network and the Chatham House for this opportunity to talk about an issue that is dear to my heart, actually. The issue of women specifically and relationship to environment is one of the issues that is rarely talked about in the scientific community, especially in Iraq. So I will start the presentation, which is part of a paper that is already published, and it's created a good feedback and responses from different parts of the world because it's very rare for a scientist from Iraq to talk about this issue. This is, having said that, I feel that is an opportunity for others who are listening and maybe tell us if they have done similar thing. Recently, I saw a few papers about the ecosystem services, and that is really exciting. And I'm very happy that some of the younger generation started to discuss issues other than very discipline-oriented, specifically in the science area. So let's start with the title, which is the collision course between water, environment, and culture in Mesopotamia specifically. Most of you know what we are talking about the marshes, which are in southern Iraq, and they are expanded between the three southern governorates, which is Basra in the south, and then Maysan or Amara to the east, and Diqar to the west, northern of Basra. So this area, which is between the Tigris and Euphrates, as you see in the map, is the historic or the ancient or the major marsh area. This area has been exposed to a lot of environmental and human impacts, which changed the environment, of course, and impacted the health and well-being of the people around the area. And these changes happened, some of them deliberately, some due to reduced amount of water that comes in the Tigris and Euphrates that feed the area. The area historically known as one of the major historic and archaeological sites, as you see to the left, where some of the identified sites of archaeological resources, compared to the right side where you see the oil fields, as well as the area is rich in history, it's also rich in oil. It's a blessing in one side, but it's a curse on the other side. So having to extract oil, of course, impact the environment and impact the archaeological sites as well. This is a very famous picture from the 70s. Shows the Chebsha or Chebaish, where the Marsh Arabs used to live, the way of living. They developed, because of the shallowness of the water, so they built their houses on top of the water. And the relatives, you will see them in line and close to each other, and then they extend family, move further and further. This is very, very famous. It's not my picture, of course, it's from a publication. So this is the environment that in my generation I'm aware of, and I know it well, and I visited many times. And you will see later in the presentation how this environment changed and how shocking the environment is now. This is a closer site where the houses and the way of transportation. This is the major way of transportation using mashhoof. This is also a historic picture showing that the women participation, and this is from 1978. UNESCO at that time declared Iraq free of illiterate people. So that is not far away from now, where the situation is completely changed. That is 1978. And it says in Arabic that women from the marshes on their way to schools. So using their transportation, the mashhoof, going to their schools. This picture is after 2003. What you see, it's an aerial photograph of what is left of the marshes. The dark patches shows the settlement, settlement of people from the marshes, from different places. This is only one side, but it will tell you the difference between the amount of the water that you were looking at in the previous picture and look at this one. And when we look from inland, and this is where I took these pictures, this is what left from the marshes. At least this is the part of the marshes that we visit in north of Basra. So the legacy of the water that is left, where you see on the right-hand side, of women travel or walk a distance 2-3 kilometers to reach the water. And in the bottom picture, you will see the houses and the dry desert-like area where it used to be a marshland. The same on the left side where the buffaloes are, it's the same place where the women are getting the water from. They use the water for cooking, for washing, and for the animals, because buffaloes, as many of you know, need the water. They can't live without the water. So this is used for animal and the human consumption. And it's the same site. This is again a comparison between the 70s, and this is around 2003, 2004, where After the change of the regime, lots of international organizations and researchers came and worked on the issues and on the plan to revive the marshes. And this picture was contrast, a really very sad picture. This is also a village. And when you look at this left side, you see the rise up of the road compared to the depression where the houses is. This is a man-made road. This is how the previous regime cut the marshes into parts and dry it. And these roads used to travel from one side to the other, but it's used also to dry the marshes and cut them off of the water sources. And you see the plants instead of the reeds, of course, now you see only a desert kind of plants. Now, I left Iraq 91 and I returned back 2008. And as I mentioned earlier in the picture showing the lush green and full of water, beautiful sites of the marshes, and I came 2008 to look and go and visit again the marshes and saw how dry and desolate the situation is. I was really shocked and really upset and very sad. And since then, I started to, visit the marshes as to study mostly the water quality changing of the environment also. But it struck me when I talked to the elder people, to the sheikhs, and then I love talking to women and chatting to them, especially the older women. And I asked them, what you are doing now, sitting in a place like a desert. What did you do before and what are you doing now? And I asked the younger woman, what do you do now? Do you go outside to the fields? The usual things that your mothers and grandmothers did. And it shook me that the younger woman didn't do any of the activities that the older women used to do. So in talking to a colleague of mine, actually in one of my presentation in the US, I talked to a colleague, Dr. Michelle Stevens, who is here. And I told her how upset and sad about this and what I talked to the women about and what they were telling me. And she said, why we don't put this in a paper? Why we don't write it? Let's start to write it. Actually, that encouraged me and thought about it because I never thought of talking about this issue in regard or in relationship to the environment that I'm focused on. So in any way, we started to talk, and then two young women, one of them is Bayan, she is an Iraqi young woman. She is going soon to study in the UK also and about environment. And this lovely lady here, Kelly Godwin, she was a member of NGO in Iraq, in Basra. And I met her by chance and I was talking to her so passionately about this issue. And she said, can I help? I would like to come and work with you on this. I said, of course, you are most welcome. So the four of us formed a team and we visited the places and the marshes, and then we ended up writing the paper, and Kelly went to the US again and presented the paper. So here is the paper coming from these 4 lovely women talking about the issue of women from the marshes. So before we're talking about the specific issue, but traditionally the management and the practices that are used in the marshes themselves, what they do, they harvest vegetation and mostly, of course, the reeds to feed their main source of wealth, which is the buffaloes. They also dig channels and outlets for agriculture. They use patches of the land, especially at the edge of the marshes, to grow agriculture purposes. Usually they grow rice also in these areas. And they herding livestock, of course, and it is mainly is the buffaloes. It's their wealth and their pride. And they maintain the channels they dig. Also, they do the annual burning of reeds or reed beds to clear waterways and bring new growth. Also, leave land fallow every third year to combat salinity. So they have these technique and management practices because, of course, the area is well known for accumulation of salt because of the salinity of the water and the nature of the soil in the area. So they know that from millennia, they know this, and they have the practice of leaving pieces of the land that used to grow plants, leave it for 1 year or 2 years, and then they come back to it to replant it. In the paper, the major question that we talked about was, how has the desiccation impacted women's interaction with the environment? This is the major issue that I thought about, and we discussed it among us, the four of us. And what are ways in which women previously benefited from ecosystem services provided by the marshes, but are no longer able to do so? So these are the questions I knew mostly of talking to the women, but we wanted to do it systematically to record it from their words, from their mouth. So we developed a procedure. And before I say that, actually, just to inform you that this research, and as many Iraqi knows that, our universities don't fund research projects. They fund us as, paying salaries and provide facilities to us, but there isn't a specific funding for a research project. So my colleagues who worked with me from the US and from the NGO, they did it, just for the love of the subject and their interest also. We didn't pay any money to them. That is the point. So the sites that we use, this is according to the map, coming from the south up to the border of the Hamar Marsh. So north of Basra up to the southern of the Hamar Marsh, as you see. We visited villages and we talked to the women. So the method that we used is on-site semi-structured interview. We interviewed 34 women in the Hamar Marsh, and we talked to them about pre and post desiccation activities comparisons, about agriculture, animal husbandry, fishing, handicraft, reeds, selling in the market, medical or medicinal plants, and added domestics. These are the main focus of the questions that we ask them. So we ask the younger generation, do you do 1 or 2, 3, 4, or any of these, and why not? And we ask similar question to the older women, and we let them talk about what they did and how they did it before, and the younger generation, what they do now. So to give you just an idea of the sites that we visited, some of the sites were very dry, but they still call them marshes. So this is just north of Basra. This is site 1 compared to this site, site 7, which is at the edge of Hamar Marsh, which is closer to the water. One of the funny things that I talked to my colleague Michelle at the time, I told her I was very frustrated when I go to the homes of the people, the Marsh Arabs, and I see the woman sitting in the front in the morning, sitting in the front of TV watching Turkish soap opera. So when we went out and they were showing us their buffaloes, the young woman here on the right was calling this buffalo a name of an actor or actress in the soap opera. So that started us laughing and chatting with them about how they changed and what they are interested in now compared to what they previously did. So this gives you an idea about the range of the age group that we talked. We talked about widely from 18, 19-year-old women to about 70-year plus age woman group. They love, of course, as many of you, they love chatting. And when they see, you know, people coming from away, they love to talk to them and tell them their stories. Now, look at this histogram and you will see the change in women's activities pre and post desiccation. If you look at the blue line and see how active the women were in all the major items that we ask about, the agriculture, animal husbandry, fishing, handicraft, trade, and going to the souk and doing also the domestic. Compared to the present day as the orange, and see that young women hardly do any of the activities that the older women did. And of course, there is also the difference between the areas where they were closer to the water and distant from the water in the marsh areas. So if you see the reed collecting, the highest number of women in the pre-desiccation, which are obviously the older women, mostly women did the collecting of reed. They go to the field, they collect the reed, they bring them back to their neighborhood or to their area to feed their buffaloes. While if you see in the domestic, younger women, almost all of them are domestic, just sitting at home. Of course, that has reasons to do that, and mainly is security. Of course, that is before 2003, and up to about 2008, 2009, security was an issue. So most of younger generation, younger women didn't go to the field for the fear, for security reasons. And then when we compare the activity according to life stage. So women above 40, and this is, it makes sense that above 40, it means they were born and were, in the age where they can go out. That was before 2003. And again, you see that the higher number above 40 used to go or active in most of the activities of participation in the ecosystem services and benefit from the environment, collecting reeds, going to the souk to sell their produce like the milk and the produce from the milk like the cheese and the yogurts and this into the markets. And the souk, the market they go to, it's not just their neighborhoods or the area. They go further. They come to Basra. They go north to Maysan and the Qar city centers. They go there and sell not only also in the major or the main markets, but they go into the suburbs. And in the 70s, very interesting. In the 70s, I used to see women driving pickups in their regions, in the area, in the marshes. Of course, now this is something even difficult and hard for women to do, in especially talking about southern Iraq, not the northern part or capital in Baghdad. So then we come back to the proximity. So we divided the groups into being close to the water from 0, as you saw in the pictures, to 100 meters, 100 to 500, and then more than 500 meters to the rivers and canal. We saw that women from 0 to 100 teach their daughters handicraft. They go to the field. They assist the, their husbands or their fathers in work, some in the fields, but not far further away. Only women who live 100 to 500 engage in agriculture and gather reed. In all categories, half of women use to raise animals, but only few do now. That is because people now don't have this fortune also, and they told us that they sell their buffaloes to sustain their living, or sell their buffaloes because there isn't good water, enough water to give to their buffaloes. So most of when there is an episode of saline water coming to the marshes or to the riverine that they are adjacent to them, they have to buy water for themselves and for their animals. So most of them say that we can't sustain this, so we have to sell most of our buffaloes, more of our animal, and leave one or two. And if they attend the buffaloes, it is within their neighborhood or close environment near the houses where they live. The craft that they used to do, and most of them are not doing it anymore, depends, of course, on the ecosystem itself, where they get it from the reeds, the date palm groves, and from the buffaloes. And this is just a simple example of what they do with the handicraft, which is also a source of funding for them. They go and sell it in the market, and of course that will sustain the family also, especially families that women are heading. The fathers died or old or sick. Women depend on doing these and sell them in the market. This is one of our colleagues from the US. I work with them on a project, and this is a small project funded by US to maintain cultural heritage and handicrafts. This is in the Chibayish area. We were visiting them there. This is an example of women actively in the field using their mashhoof or their way of traveling to collect the reeds and bring them back to their houses, to their areas, to feed and to do whatever they do with the reeds themselves, either selling them in the market or using them to feed their animals. So in conclusion, this paper is, one I think is very limited. Similar issues that have been tackled by Iraqis themselves. We would like to encourage more papers in this area, similar, maybe targeting different ideas, but hopefully to link environment, because we did water quality. I have a student now who are studying the ecosystem services in these similar areas. But we would like to go to we did in the western marshes, in the Hamar mainly and north of Basra. We would like to do in the central marshes and which is the eastern marshes. We would like to give tools as well for survival in this harsh environment now. Hopefully that my colleague who will follow in his presentation, because he is doing really good thing, but I think it's still targeting mainly men, young men and men, but we would like specifically to target women as well in benefiting and surviving in these environments. Of course, also the cultural heritage, because we talked to the sheikh and the older women, and they were telling us fascinating stories they learned, as they told us, from their predecessors about how do they recognize good water from bad water in the marshes. They told me, for example, they didn't have sewage system, and we know that they didn't have sewage system in the marshes, but recognizing plants that grow in the marsh. They know these plants grow only where the water is good and suitable for human consumption compared to other areas. So this is very interesting. We didn't know that, but we need to preserve this cultural knowledge. We need to, and they know that certain plants are used for medicinal purposes, as similar to, other parts of the world where these generations live in this environment, they interact with it, and they know a lot more than we do as outsiders coming. So we want to preserve this knowledge. We want to document this knowledge. It's very important, I think, because as you saw from the documentation, that we are losing the knowledge by losing the older people and people who are interested. Water rights, of course, continue as issue, and lobbying the water is really happening, but still, I think the water management issues internally, I always say that is a big issue. We talk about the neighboring countries and the right of Iraq water in general. Yes, it's true, but also inside Iraq, we have big issues, bigger problems of managing our water resources. These are pictures, finally. This is from the eastern Hawza area. I went to this area just recently, I mean last year. As you see, the water is there, but it's very dry. Nothing is there because the water was coming back just recently. So this kind of areas that need to be worked with to improve the situation in this area. This is the same. You see the vast dry areas, and you see a small riverines in the area. And if you look at the right picture, you see in the background this smoke. It's of the oil production, because these areas, of course, as I said at the beginning, they have the oil wealth as well as having, the cultural heritage of the marshes. So finally, I just wanted to mention also, because maybe my colleague Rashad will challenge me and say, no, there are good areas. Yes, there are small patches of good marsh area that we need to preserve, but also the area that I just showed you previously, this where you see just a small riverines or river of water, the people are using it, and from the area they dig ponds, and they do aquaculture. They grow fish here and they sell it in the market, but still the productivity is not good, and it depends on the water quality. So they spend their money and energy, and then the water change into saline water, kills their product, and it causes a lot of a problem to them. So hopefully that will give you an idea about the environment and the culture in this paper. And thank you very much for your patience with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nadia. I suggest, following Mahir's advice, that we proceed, I'm conscious about time, that we proceed to Rashad Salim's paper, talk, because his talk is a bit longer, and that I will devote the last 20 to 25 minutes to ask for your questions from the public, if this is okay for both of you. So our next speaker is Mr. Rashad Salim, who is an artist, and he's Iraqi-German artist who has a particular interest in the history and development of culture and technology, as reflected in ancient boats, vernacular architecture, and craft heritage. Rashad not only is an artist, he's a kind of interdisciplinary researcher who can bring for us new ideas to the discipline of cultural heritage. And he works a lot in consultancies, and he has a project called the Safina project, which seems very interesting. I don't want to delay. I would like to leave the floor to you, Rashad, to give your talk entitled Cultural Heritage, the Environment and Sustainability in Iraq and Geographic Mesopotamia, Notes in regards to systemic perspectives and expeditionary approach. The floor is yours, Rashad.
Thank you very much. And welcome all, and assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much indeed, Nahrein Foundation for Nahrein Network for not only this, but making much that I'm showing possible. That and other organizations that I've worked that help to indicate. It is an expeditionary approach, and we must think about Iraq and Mesopotamia as a land that has been open to people, to movement, and with the rivers as a key network. Much didn't change since 3000 BC. Sorry. But we can look at a major systemic change with the beginning of the 20th century. The photograph of the image that you have over here by, I think, by Maxwell, Donald Maxwell, which I found in the British Imperial War Museum, shows that changing point from a pre-industrial to that industrial age, which has certainly sort of affected everything in Iraq. We had a very busy water system with boats of all types using it. This was the beginning of the end. There's also a change in the materiality of engagement. What you see over here are boats that are made out of natural materials, materials that were found locally or imported, woods, etc. What I later on found out was a lot of this has turned to metal. It is the age of metal as well as of combustion of engines. Engines that have combustion engine, one of the reasons why the rivers aren't as used. But it's also war. And what is interesting over here is that in my travels, I realized that England is part of our cultural heritage and one that you can see throughout the country. There are people actually that are collecting and interested in it, specifically the British history in Iraq. And it is at the Imperial War Museum, amongst other archives, that we have a main sort of archaeological strata of evidence of what has been lost, what has gone. I'm fascinated, for example, on one of my expeditions, to find in Kut a canoe that you can see in a photograph over here was brought with the British military at that time, still existing. And this is interesting because metal is actually more durable than many other materials. So you won't find.
Rashad, can you please, sorry to interrupt you, can you please more speak into your microphone? Because some people can't hear you very well. Thank you.
Right. So you'll not find the wooden boats, but you'll find this example of this metal kayak, as well as the hospital ship number 1. I think we still have the hulk of it in Dijla in Baghdad. But in the Imperial War Museum at the moment, there's an exhibition by Ai Weiwei, and it points to what is the most influential and destructive element on our environment, on our ecology, on our cultural heritage, on everything else, and that is war and the continuation of war. Over here in the picture and in the museum itself, there's an example of the remains of a bombed car in Mutanabbi Street that we had I had some engagement with in one of my exhibitions in Den Haag, which I'll show later. Yeah. Bombs, we have a major change now in the ecology. When we speak about the environment, previously with wars, those that engaged in the wars became part of the land. Their blood became part of the land. There wasn't an effect on the ecology, on the environment of the land. Today we have an extension of pollution, if you wish, and of destruction, environmental destruction that has entered into the very body fabric, the DNA, cultural heritage, if you wish, of our people has been affected with the use, for example, of depleted uranium. And it was these sort of issues that I was engaged with until quite recently as an activist and an artist as well. Of course, wars are also one of the depletes the kinds of funds, the kinds of attention needed towards survival and sustainability. And it creates a cycle where not only do we have a brain drain, I, for one, for example, left Iraq in 82 because of Saddam's war, and his invasion of Kuwait probably was the opening of the doors of hell that was used, one of the biggest mistakes. So I myself was not a refugee, self-willed, my leaving Iraq. But during that period, being outside and not in touch with it and being engaged with the destruction that we're seeing all the time in Iraq was something that was at least depressive, and also felt more and more, that there isn't really much one can do. It seems to be going on. So it's very important, my return. Amongst the effects of war is, of course, a displacement. And we have a brain drain. We have a discontinuity of research, of active, of work, of connection with the land itself. And with that migration and that displacement, you have a full cycle that continues that war and becomes the excuse. So those that are doing the war are actually producing the excuse for continuation that we see now in politics generally and populism. This is in Holland, in Den Haag, one of my last exhibitions. I was curating this, and you can see over here a symbol. This symbol I'll be returning back to it. It's a Sebaiyun. It's a symbol for protection. It's part of our cultural heritage that you'll find everywhere from in Iraq, from north to south, east to west. It's given to children as a protective amulet. And these amulets are packages. So I did something about this comparison between bullets and weapons as a package of destruction. Funnily enough, these are more tangible than that package of well-being. So it was really on my return in 2013, thanks to Nature Iraq and an expedition that we did from Hassan Kiev in southeast Turkey. That was my first sort of return to the environment, return to this ecology, return to this cultural heritage. And following the roots of my grandfather, of previous generations. It's a major effect on me, and has been the reason really that I now have some hope. At least I'm participating in doing something, inshallah, constructive. I looked and see why do we do archaeology? Why do we do anthropology? And wherever you look, the answer comes to this. Where do we come from? What are we? And where are we going? This is a painting by Gauguin when he was in Tahiti, one of his last paintings, a monumental work. And the work below it is by Salim, who also in this work does that, gives that narrative. You find the same narrative about the same question in the earliest written narrative, that of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the same question: where are we going, how we sustain it? Interesting enough, of course, this is the monument itself was designed, the background, do it by the late Rifat Chayderchi, one of our great architects, and directly references cylinder seals. Cylinder seals are one of the pictorial, I don't read cuneiform, but I can certainly read cylinder seals and see that. And it is one of the sources for the research that we're doing and for learning about this connection between the culture and the environment. I was also interested in my visit in 2019, that the young people there were actually gathering, and there was demonstrations in that area. They were conscious of the cultural value of this point where they consulted me as to lighting it, whether they could, whether they should, whether this would be a fact. I find that in the youth of Iraq, there is a high level of awareness of that cultural heritage, a high level of awareness of the link between this and sustaining their activity. A lot of people that I meet, I've met in Iraq and all my travels, want to leave, and really cultural heritage and sustaining a living there is one of the ways of keeping people there, obviously. So this is some of the works you can see, for example, over here. It's, the word over here is Hub in red, that has been mural. And there's a continuation between the mural of Jawad and the Freedom Monument, Sahat Tahrir, and a new expression. Iraqis are expressive. Of course, Iraq is part of Mesopotamia, and Mesopotamia is a vast land, a vast region that is integrated. These rivers were connections, were means of transport, of exchange, of trade. They're interlinked. It's a natural setting for civilization. Civilization wasn't created, but by people as much as by that geography and by the linkage that were possible between one area and another. Sadly, I've had to curtail a lot of things that I want to say, but as an example, and one of the things is my recent sort of work in Kurdistan, or my introduction to Kurdistan in that area. And you can see, for example, in Kurdistan, the Kurdish winter is a mountain winter is very bitter. It would have been less tolerable without the dibis and rashi, the date syrup and tahiniya that is very much part of the winter breakfast. There's been an exchange constantly, and that exchange has been with often boats. I'm always surprised when people talk about the division of Iraq into three or whatever, and that it was created by the British. Obviously, that's a falsehood, because Iraq happens to be the first state and first empire, and it is that geography that unifies it, and the integrated connections of that environment and the complementarity of that environment. I was looking at boats. Each area, the south, the central area, and the north have particular boats. These are in the in the south, the reed bundle boats, the canoes. In the center, you have the gufwas, and in the north, you have the kellets. What you see over here are examples of that, and we'll see more of them later. As a young man of 20, I was fortunate enough to become part of the Torhados Tigris expedition, which we built this boat in Gurna. You can see the techniques are very similar to that of the very famous Maldives. But what was also interesting is that these boats, all of these boats that we have been working with, are generic. That means that you find these type of boats all over the world. And it is the ecology, it is the environment and the material of that environment that creates these types of boats. We traveled around the Arabian Peninsula, actually to the Indus, wanting to connect the three river civilizations, the Indus, the Nile, and to show that trade was possible. And that's one of the things that Torhados did, was he showed that water, rivers, the sea were not barriers, but means of engagement. And within this expedition, we also went to Oman. And here's one of the clues of this ancient interconnectivity, culturally, materially, ecologically, between different parts. In Oman, there's a mine, a copper mine. All that's left of it is the entrance to what was a mountain of copper. And copper, the question was, how did that copper get to Mesopotamia? Because Mesopotamia, Iraq, does not have copper. And we know that it has boats. We found we didn't, but further excavations found a port. And in this port, there were remains of, the only remains of it were clumps of tar. And in this tar, you had the imprint of reed bundles. And analyzing these tar, you saw that they came from heat, from Iraq itself. I am still fascinated by how they managed to do this. We have to remember that this was in the transition from the Stone Age to the Copper Age. It was in that transition where we still didn't have the metals that we would need for big carpentry constructions. In that expedition in 2013, down the Tigris, I noticed that these gufwas, there were no gufwas during the way on our path, and those that I did see were metal. But I went to Babil, to Sadat al-Hindiya in Hilla, where I knew they used to have build these boats, and I did find one. It was the last one was made in 2003 with the invasion, and it gave me a sort of an epiphany, an idea, a vision, and that vision had to do with the Sabr Ayun. When you gather these gufwas, which are round, you create a particular pattern, the same pattern that you have in the amulet, as well as in nature and in Islamic geometric pattern. It is the best way of gathering anything together. If you hold reeds, or and that is actually what the reed column is. It's a bundle of reeds. The cross section would be this shape. This gave me the idea that about the Ark of Noah. Interestingly, we do have now evidence. There's been a lot of work to show that there was a flood, that actually Mesopotamia and the rivers extended into the Gulf all the way to Hormuz, to the Straits of Hormuz, at the end of Hormuz, and this area flooded. And we're finding more and more evidence. There's been an incredible amount of work being done in the Gulf region and Arabia into prehistory and the development and the changes of that area. So in fact, this would be the area that you'd have had the ark, had there been an ark. And it's actually not even a Mesopotamian ark, it would be a Gulf ark. So the ark is well known. There are over 350 flood and boat stories around the world. It's a global phenomenon, and it's one that has a resonance with our times, and that we are facing now rising waters with climate change. But it is also something that has been owned, if you wish, by actually through script, because you have the story that has gone from prehistory, orally, to the first written documentation you have in the Gilgamesh and in Mesopotamia, early Mesopotamia, to the Babylonians, through the Akkadians, to the Babylonians, from the Babylonians to the Torah, to the Bible, on. You have this sort of Chinese whispers of the Ark, and each one owns it. The most recent one has been by, or interpretation of what it could be, was by Professor Finkel, who found a Babylonian text, 1500 BC, and they tried to rebuild this, or build an example of the description that they found. It failed. And if you look at the most famous ark, if you wish, is that presented by the Christian tradition and the Western tradition. It's actually an ark based on 17th century European boat construction. And sadly, it also has very much the aspects of a prison architecture. So I've come with an alternative. I'm not into proving that there was an ark or not, but in a way, using this concept, this vision of the ark, which we'll be presenting at the Venice Biennale, Architectural Biennale 2021, inshallah, as Iraq's first participation in this Biennale, in the architectural one. And as a way of gathering, not only is the plan a matter of gathering, so the idea isn't one big structure, but all the technology, all that you would have, so what we propose is, how would an ark of its time and its place have been constructed? I think that you wouldn't have done something that you've never done before and put all your eggs in that basket. You'd have gathered the whole village, everything to it, and indeed, that is what you find in the very earliest depictions of it. So it's a gathering, and this has been my way of engaging with the cultural heritage of boats and crafts, looking at what we see as a continuity of this this cultural heritage from prehistoric times into our time. This is the first time in the history of Iraq that certain types of boats, certain types of crafts, certain types of material have disappeared. This is phenomenally new. It is, so working with this we are studying it. I haven't written any papers yet, or books or whatever, but we are still gathering. We're still in an expedition. And we've achieved much within the last 5 years of working, thanks to friends and organizations that have helped to fund us. But there's still much to do and gather, because in Iraq, despite this amazing maritime history, does not have one single specialist or department in this field. Two, the anthropological movement in Iraq has been destroyed. We still have people, amateurs, working on it. We used to have a journal about it, but there has been a breakage due to this war, and we're trying to see how to address that. I've been working with on site in different sites. This is in the south of Iraq in Sud al-Shuyukh, where we had originally built the builders of the Tigris reed boat had come. It is now dry, while at the time it was wetland. It had waterways, like Dr. Nadia has pointed out. There's been complete changes in the environment and the structures of it. So by working with this, we are also looking how to engage with this material in a new way, create new products, engage with universities, and look how to develop the vernacular architecture, or interest in the vernacular architecture and the crafts as a way of continuity and sustainability and engagement or re-engagement with the ecological environment. I shan't go into this because Nadia has really done a wonderful presentation on this issue. The problem of the marshes is quite clear and what has happened to it. But what I'd like to point out is that it's not just the marshes. Down from the marshes, you have areas all the way down to Ashar in Basra, and right up actually to the central Iraq. You had a system of canals. These are well known. You had orchards with canalways going through it that were part of the ecological system and part of the culture over there. You could people used to take boats into these palm orchards and collect the dates straight into it. Also, it's not just reeds that are interesting, but the palm. If I go back, the palm itself is an underrated material. There are literally hundreds of products that have come from it. Everything from the life jackets used to be made from the karab, which is the end of the palm frond. Shoes were made from it. These are all things that have been plastified now. We have so many products that used to be made from our material, from sources, from our environment, from our ecology, palm and cane, that are now plastic. We drink from plastic, it's a major problem that this kind of work hopefully will show or rediscover these solutions too. And Nadia has shown one of this image as well. I mean, this map of this area, but it is an encroachment. The petroleum industry has literally desiccated the area. It has destroyed these agricultural areas. We used to have something like 30 million palm trees. We're down to 10. We used to export it. We now import it. This is just one of many products, and just also only one of the areas. I visited Ain Tamar, close to Karbala, for example, oasis area. It's being destroyed. It's known for its palm trees. They're dying. Baghdad itself, starting with developments in the 70s, concrete and urban development, and to now the destruction of the palm trees. Baghdad, we used to sleep on the roofs. During the 70s, and by the end of the 70s, we couldn't sleep on the roofs because of the heat that was contained in this concrete. So there's this direct relation between the environment, the ecology, and sustaining, being able to live. Boats are iconic, and they're part. I don't think there's any Iraqi artist that has not depicted the mashhouf, for example. But it's not just the shape of the mashhouf. It's not just the mashhouf itself, but its form. So I'm looking at the aesthetics of the palm tree, of the parabolics of the palm, and it breaks my heart that we paint these and they do not exist. These mashahif have disappeared. The boats now that are being used in the marshes are metal. Though these boats have a very ancient pedigree, we have models of them from Ur. They're ancient. But in our investigations, we have discovered that they may have been made by different materials. And in fact, the Industrial Revolution, through the introduction of nails and the importation of wood, the boats that we see in the 20th century are actually new. They are 20th century mishhus. They're not the ancient ones, though they've maintained the form. So we're investigating as well as how these boats could have been made before. This has been through engaging with the Huer in Basra, used to be the center for boat making. So it's been a fascinating engagement with the local community to create this sort of dialogue between the generations. The young people have not even seen the actual wooden boats, these mashahid. The waters have disappeared, the ecology has changed. So we're looking how to engage with this, rebuilding these boats, and how to, not only to preserve them and to study them, but how to give them a future. We see that these boats are they're not only beautiful, but they're a means of engaging with the environment, with the ecology, a means of traveling, of expeditioning, short, long, They're also something of pride. They're beautiful. I consider them works of art. And indeed, in speaking with the older people who made these boats, when I showed them photographs of old photographs of boats, they could identify who had made which boat, the actual maker. That means that these are actually works of art, and beautiful works of art. One of my fantasies, or I'm hoping to make it actually, is actually to take these boats and bring them to the rivers of the world, including London and the Thames, sort of Mesopotamia upon Thames, to expedition with these boats as the British had expeditioned on the Tigris and Euphrates. This is an area that we've been working in, but again, this connection between one place and another, and this is the tarring of the Gufwa. I mean, the time does not allow that I go into details, and I'm trying to cover ground, so excuse the speed and also the absences maybe of some information. But this tar comes, and the family that of Abu Sajjad and Asadi, he continued the trade of bringing tar from heat right through all the troubles, the wars, etc. It continued because this is used for roofing as well as for boat waterproofing. And we continued our investigations in heat, we found connections, including this at the bottom left. This we find it in Ur and the cemeteries. We didn't know what it was. Some people even thought it might be a lamp, but it is exactly this, what we call the Kaya Asbiya. Over here, there's a picture by, photographed by Richard Bell, one of the few pictures. It's not a very pretty boat, but this is the boat that used to bring from the most ancient of times the tar down the rivers to Ur, that built Ur. And it is also a unique type of construction. So each of the different kinds of boats that we've been working on gives us more evidence of how that or becomes parts of the tools and the techniques of the art reimagined that we are proposing, and also a way of containing it. We are discovering so much, and it's really the last people now. We're touching the last people who have the actual living engagement with these technologies and these techniques. It's been an amazing thing, and in each and every place, I've had the opportunity also to go in the surrounding areas and to discover how rich is the herbs, the plants, the ecology as part of the life of the region, but also as what was traded from that region to other places. For example, Heat is famous for its tahiniya, yeah, its sesame, but also its za'atar and things like that. By now we have a number of boats. We have over 20 boats that we have made, actually more, but 20 boats that actually we can use. Other boats are experimental and museum pieces. And it's been it's been amazing to see how these boats have brought not only joy, but has brought an opportunity for young people to engage in their environment and in their ecology. We are now using these boats, and we've made workshops where we are taking these boats out onto the water. We've discovered, this is interesting by the way, that these mashahif, though I've not seen a single photograph of these mashahif with a sail, it was by studying this and by an old man who said, you know, we found in photographs of the mashhuf what is called a mast step, which is where you put your mast. And I'd ask him, what is this? And he said, well, we raise sails, you know, on these boats. This is the first time in maybe over 60 years that sails have been raised in Iraq. So that's a point of major pride and hope. Yeah. Anyway, so with these, we hope to continue the study. Now, like I mentioned, there isn't any departments, any museum, wing, or nothing about maritime cultural heritage in Iraq. And we're proposing that should happen, and that we want to prepare in a way many of the global institutions, any book you open up about ancient Mesopotamia will tell you the importance of it, yet alone, you know, the fact that Iraq is a geographic nexus of trade between the whole region. You know, it is where the Silk Road passed through, where the Indian trade went through the Gulf and onto land, you know, etc. So it is immensely rich. Other than that, I mean, you have the countries around. The countries around, including the Gulf countries, do have you know, maritime and studies and are proud of it, have museums of it. Iraq should have it, if only to understand what it became. Iraq's maritime, I believe, is as important as agriculture in the creation of civilization. This is just a few slides left. This is, you know, people say that, you know, Basra is the Venice of the East. Actually, in point of fact, it's Venice that is the Basra of the West. We had you know, the Venetians themselves, and I've been a couple of times now to Venice in preparation. They acknowledge the debt they have and the inspiration that they have from Basra. And we are looking forward in this in our participation in Venice to hopefully link Basra and Venice, because they both face very much the same problems of rising waters, the destruction of all that. And we've not only that, but Venice and Venice, the Venetia area, is very similar to Basra in that it is part of a river system that went all the way to the mountains of Milan, these areas in Italy, where boats and very similar boats used to come down. And we found also that we have very few descriptions or images of Islamic boats. And here you find an image from Al-Wasiti that looks very much like a gondola. So we're looking to see, perhaps with the Bocantoro, who are the boatmen of the Doge in Venice, how perhaps to build this Middle Ages Islamic granddaddy of the gondola. There are many other similarities between them, but here I'd like to sort of, and I'll be ending this with maybe what Dr. Fawzi, Dr. Nadia Fawzi had mentioned about women. Right through our work in Iraq, right through our work, we have always been looking at women. Women were the ones that did the basket work for the Gulf, for example. But also in one of the central sort of arts of these women, crafts of the women, which is the Izar Chef, the wedding blankets of the Marsh Arabs. Actually, not the Marsh Arabs. The Marsh Arabs used them, but it was created by the townswomen around the marshes. And also possibly, though we don't have exact data on it, by Marsh women themselves. But these were heirloom pieces, wedding blankets. And I find in them a continuum with history and an expression of that environment. These works of, I consider, art are highly influential on contemporary Iraqi art. You can see it and it's in the actual composition, in the soul of Iraqi art. You can find this craft made by women for their weddings. They're different types. They're commercial ones and they're heirloom ones. But during the period of wars and sanctions, we lost a lot of them. These women lost them, and we have had a massive discontinuity. They were being sold for nothing. I know women who worked 2-3 weeks to make one piece to sell, just to get medicine for their child. But we are working on it, and we are studying as well at the continuum, the continuity of the iconography that we find in cylinder seals, for example, the impressions of cylinder seals and in ceramics in this art of the of women of southern Iraq. There are issues over here, environmental and ecological influence, for example, in the dyes they use. These dyes used to be made from the plants that they'd find around and that were local, as well as brought down the river. Now they're chemical colors. So each, we need to. I'm not. I don't have the skills, but we want to create such a situation or a momentum way in which we could perhaps reintroduce these plants, reintroduce these skills. And this would, of course, create work as well as a product. But we also want to find the artists in them. And indeed, as you can see in a previous one, the works of Ghassan, these are artworks, and we are collecting her works. We are wanting to develop, as well as not having experts in maritime or in vernacular architecture. Iraq, strangely enough, also doesn't have, despite a really amazing art scene and so many important artists, we don't have naive artists. We don't have artists that are coming from the people. So here we're trying as well in our project to develop this this aspect of it, including, I mean, on the top left. We are hoping to create, I'm wanting to do some artwork as well using this technique, and we actually have a fund from the British Council to do it that we've not been able to finish because I want to be there with these women working on it. We want to create an artwork with this to show in Venice about the art reimagined, because this is the life within the art. This is this is the life. This is what is in the center, the heart of the art. The heart being, in English, close to the word hearth, which is the central fireplace. Sorry. So I think, I hope I haven't overstepped my time, and we have some time to continue because, yeah, thank you. Thank you, and I return over here to Ai Weiwei, that I had shown his work earlier on about bombs. Truly the highest joy in human society is overcoming difficulty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashad. Thank you very much for being on time. I just want to thank both speakers for giving us very insightful talks. The first speaker, I have enjoyed listening to her because her work is not only about the environment, herself being a marine scientist, but she showed us a lot of anthropology in her work and the field work she has conducted. And her talk showed us how she's trying to empower women, which is something extremely important in the Arab world, not only in Iraq. Our next speaker, Rashad, his talk was also enlightening about the boats and the patterns that he has shown us, also ethnographic a lot in nature. So I would like to leave the floor to our public to ask us the question. So we will take in the chat box one by one, please. And I don't know who would like to go first. Thank you.
I don't quite understand.
Has a question. What policy implications can be drawn from your work? Mahyar, is that for Professor Nadia or for Rashad? Or for both? So it's for both of you.
Okay, so I mean, if I'd like to, well, definitely one of the policy is that we have to include the popular ethnographers, the popular cultural heritage activists in Iraq. We have to broaden the field. We have been in cultural heritage in Iraq. The focus has been on the built, the archaeological, rather than the periphery. This is starting to happen already. There's more and more work on the periphery, outside, rather than just on the, on the ziggurat, for example, on the center. I think that's one of the important things, is to broaden the engagement, to include the environment, the ecology, and folk culture. I think that is important. Of course, another major policy is to stop the wars. I mean, this is what's been destroying us. Yeah, I could add more, but you know what I mean.
For me, I think my work is with the higher education. I feel that policy of the Ministry of Education in general, not just higher education, and Ministry of Environment need to improve their curriculum, improving the idea of environment. Studying environment is linked to everything, to social studies, to the science, and to everywhere. So we need to build the children from the younger generation, which is not done yet. I mean, even in my education, we didn't learn much about the environment. We learned about science. So I think now it's time for the policies to change, and it needs to be addressed. Very, very important. As you saw, the environment, this is just a small example of how bad the environment is in the marshes compared to of course, the cities is another issue and another situation. Like in Basra, it's really bad. I mean, everything, not just the water, everything, even the sight, even looking at, this is what I tell them, you wake up in the morning and you look at the rubbish in the street and the smog and the smoke and everything. It makes you upset from the minute that you open your eyes. So that is, we need to change these situations. by changing the attitude, and that it will change with the education. This is very important from the younger generation.
And I think, if I may add, when you speak about policy, interestingly with Iraq, there's policy influences from outside and there's from inside. I think one of the main things is that we certainly need to develop the policy coming from the outside, but we certainly have to change the policy or the lack of policy inside the country. I mean, Iraq is dependent completely at the moment on its cultural heritage of outside investment. Whenever we've gone to any ministry, anything, there's no money. Okay, where has the money gone? It is the youth that are demonstrating, the people that are supporting them want to have a living. They want to be able to survive, to sustain, and it is through investing, the government investing in these sectors, that will create the kind of jobs that are needed, the kind of engagement that we are needed. At the moment, the absolute total lack of investment by the government, present government, and since the war, has been a crime against the people, against the culture, against everything else. So I think whatever pressure needs to be, if we stop putting the money in weaponry, many of these projects, just one armored car could fund. So I mean, I think that is maybe the biggest policy that needs to change, is from the government.
Question for Professor Nadia from Asma Al-Anbari, and she's asking you, you mentioned that your work was voluntary, and Rashad also has a question. Did you manage to find any supporters or funders for your work?
Specifically for that project, no. We did that and we finished with it. But I have a funding specifically for the environment quality, water quality, especially in Basra, and that is with the USAID. I feel that the Europeans need to engage more in Iraq because there is a benefit. I see that, the interaction between scientists from European communities is very important. I'm a graduate from UK, and I know that my supervisor at the time, he visited Basra. He knows very well the issues related. But I think since I returned back in 2008, I hardly saw any British coming to, as a scientist or researchers coming. But, there are Italians coming, which is good, but still we need to improve. I mean, we are talking to the mainly in the British medium now. So I would like to encourage that, to encourage the interaction. We have students, many students went to the US studying at the time because of a good relationship that I built with the Americans. We had about 25, 26 from Basra University went on scholarship. And that is one way of improving and linking between universities. This is very important, I think. I feel the funding come from EU on engagement, and Rashad's project is a very good example because it covers, not just the cultural heritage, culture, youth, and the environment, because that is part of changing attitude towards and engaging with the environment is very important, I think.
When it comes to us, I mean, we have had, to the same question, I think it's interesting because as an artist, we started this project as an art project, and we funded it through sales of artwork. But we were supported then by friends who were interested. They added to it, so I sold works and did work. But because we were looking at an area that was connected with others, other areas of study, and also because we were literally, this is 2016, at a point where there was a re-engagement by things like the British Council and others with this area. We did get some funds, And then increasingly, as we worked, we started getting additional funds. But we have received funds from the British Council, the CPF, the Cultural Protection Fund. We've also gotten small funds from the Ruya Foundation, for example, Makia Foundation, Nahrein, very importantly, also funded us. Alif is funding us, or has funded us, so small funds. We're looking for more funds. But the interesting thing over here is that it's not just funding, but like Nadia had spoken, it is how to fund and how to engage the different actors like universities, the makers in the field, and to draw out these plans. So with all of our projects, we're increasingly creating a network that we are looking we are then designing projects. And we have a number of projects that we have presented that we're going for further funding. And if anybody's listening to that has a relation to that, please do fund us.
Our next question is from Shada Haddad. It has two parts. Do the young people in the South want the old lifestyle back, where they work in the marches? And also, is there any help from the Gulf to donate some palm trees? Her questions are to both of you.
Please.
Okay, shall I start? This is where we might be a difference between me and Rashad. For me, I really find very hard to get young students to go into this kind of a link between the culture and the environment. This is not their fault. This is the way that they are trained. And this is where I say that the policy of the education needs to be changed. Because our education system, I don't know, many maybe from Iraq know that it is a very compartmental. If you are a science educated, you don't talk about social sciences or link it to that. Science is looking at chemistry, physics, biology, and chemistry. You know, that's it. Even geography, now I am approaching people trying to find someone who is interested to look at the social impact of change environment. I couldn't find really. I mean, I am at a distance because I have to go face to face and talk to them directly and try to convince them. It's still hard to find people that are engaged and interested. This is not their fault as much as they are not aware, and the education system make it very difficult for them. You know, I tried to put a proposal for a master's in ecosystem services, and when they looked at the proposal, they said, but there are no analysis, no chemistry, no biology. Oh, I can't get the degree like this, I said. But you know, this is part of it. You are looking at the environment and the water quality and the chemistry and the training, but you have to look to quantify what is the outcome. You say we have this amount of metal or this amount of whatever it is. What does it mean to the environment and to the people when you talk to them about it? You need to quantify, but you need to explain it to people clearly, not just to say 1,000 part ppm. What does it mean for a normal person in the street? And you tell them we have this metal and this concentration. We have to come, our masters and PhD students need to do a practical, a real life examples and situations and benefit the community and the environment from it. This is where the system itself make it hard to them to apply this kind of a new way for us, not for the world, for Iraq. This is considered a new way, and it still is very hard to convince.
As for us, one of our main partners are a youth group, Hamad Dijla, who are an activist group engaged with the environment. And there's a lot of Hamas and these are Hamat, Tigris defenders, now all over the country with centers. In all my engagements locally, as well as in urban settings, I found a lot of interest. Perhaps, I mean, luckily for us working with boats, we have something that we can share. We can give, and something that you can actually engage with directly. So we're looking at the moment to promote these boats and to preserve these boats, and we actually have a project with as consultants with UNDP and UPP on Pontipa in Nasriya, and we're looking to in various centers in Iraq to create boat clubs, to create a place where to re-engage these boats and redesign these boats for contemporary use as sports. And if we can have them as sporting boats, that would be a major point. Also with our work with textiles and Muhammad and the Izar, we're looking how to engage with fashion and with things. So when we're working with, and there's a lot of interest, by the way, in food and in Iraq. I mean, Iraqis are absolutely foodies, so I mean, and that's youth or whatever age. So I mean, there is so many opportunities in Iraq of engaging youth, and all they need is opportunity. During this whole period has been insanely alienating, especially for youth, and to open up the landscape for their engagement, like Nadia said, is one of our aims, to connect them with other generations. So we're also looking at, and we've got a plan towards developing, for example, in Baghdad, a ferry point, a cultural heritage ferry point, where we use these boats, and there'll be something that you can go and engage with. Everybody, like that quote of Gauguin, everybody wants to know where we came from, what made us who we are, and where we want to go. So I think it's natural for kids, young people, youth to be interested in what I've seen in Tahrir Square and Haboubi Square and all these young people. They're asking for it. They're saying, give us our life back, give us our country back, give us our culture back, give us our pride back. So we hope to be able to assist in providing the opportunity for this re-engagement. And when it comes to the youth in education in Iraq has plummeted. The quality of it, but we still have professionals, the professors, despite the brain drain, we still have dedicated people, and universities that are striking. Maysan University, for example, is a brilliant university with dedicated people. Basra, on the other hand, for example, is one that has become decrepit. And it's just, we need to develop the capacity, develop the quality of these places, all of us, but especially the government.
I'm sorry, I feel we missed part of the question. Was it about the date palm and the Gulf, is it?
Oh, the Gulf part. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I wish, because the Gulf during this period, these years has really developed forward in so many different fields. I mean, it is carrying the torch in the region for these fields. And I think the reconnecting culture, and we are part of the same culture. I mean, I don't look at Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia for me ends at the at the gates of the Straits of Hormuz. It is one culture. We are connected, and I think if the Gulf can help to develop this sector, knowing that this, like the Ark, is a shared heritage, I think it would be wonderful. There's a lot to learn from the Gulf. It's not just having funding from the Gulf, but we can learn from them as well.
To follow up on this question, there is a question from Caroline Sanders that is saying that there must be a lot of migration to the cities, to the big cities. Are some of the traditional craft skills being taken with the people, or are they just being lost in the process? Because this is a very important thing. We are losing the crafts of artisans. If you can elaborate on that, that would be great.
Sorry, Rashad, can I start from the point that we ask this question specifically, and I myself, being in Basra, we go to areas where a group of Marsh people that moved, of course, just going back a step further, the Marsh people, when they desiccated, the time when the marsh desiccated, most of them, of course, moved to areas in the Qar, Maysan, and Basra specifically. When they move closer to the water because this is related to their being and their culture, and of course, they move even their buffaloes with them. So I have some pictures also showing that I talked to people that moved from the marshes to Basra by the river, by Shatt al-Arab and the smaller rivers. We go and visit them and talk to them about their life. They are changed. And this brings me back to the question, do they want to go back to the marshes? Because I ask them specifically, I ask younger men and women also. Most of them said no. The living in the marshes is very hard, and we prefer the city living. And also, most of them, or many of them, born in the cities, and they didn't go to the marshes until maybe they are 12, 13-year-old. So this connection of being born there and being with the environment is missing, but they know about it from the parents and the grandparents talk, and this is how it used to be, the life was good. But when they go and see, the life is not easy, it's very hard, no water, no clean water, the schools are far away, roads are not good way of moving from one place to the other. So it's hard living. So they say no, they don't want it. But I'm sure, and we were thinking of a project that bring a small model marsh as used to be village, and then we use this is a way, and I talked to Rashad about it, that we use this model to train some younger generation by the older generation, and then we build, because the environment need to be a connected site, especially for the marshes. So we thought if we start with a small, supported marsh environment, and then another one, but linked with the waterway, and then we built on this by training people, and then those trained people train the others. So you are training the trainers, and then expanded. This is a way of encouraging and giving opportunities, and they benefit by tourists and by getting funding by selling their goods, and benefit from the ecosystem itself. So this is how to encourage them to go back to, to live where, their grandparents maybe were.
Yeah, I mean, Iraqis are very practical and extremely practical, and they won't hang on to anything, and not only practical but black and white. Other countries like Morocco and Yemen, places with a rich heritage, a cultural heritage, and a craft heritage, they manage to separate the two. That there is this cultural heritage and that there is contemporary life. Iraqis have been unable, except in the worst case, to separate the two. We live in that totality. So I mean, like Dr. Fawzi said, it's difficult, or right, don't want those difficulties. The city has moved to the rural areas, not vice versa. The combustion engine, plastics, metal has taken over. So if you look in the Marsh architecture, the roofing is now plastic. The sides are commemorated metal, etc., that sort of thing. Like the boats have been metallized as well. But however, Iraqis are also people of the tongue, of the language. And in the cities, you see a continuation of the folk poetry, rural poetry of song. So the heart of it is in the word, in the rhythm, in the song. And that I see as a continuity right through in the language. I think once it is shown that it is actually practical to engage with the crafts, it will boom. We've discovered, for example, that in the marshes, they used to make mattresses like the tatami mattresses of Japan. They used to make mattresses, very fine mattresses, like the tatami mats of Japan, that have become an international commodity. We could do the same if it's practical, instead of having literally plastic mattresses. There's so many opportunities in the redesigning of the crafts based on tradition, on our heritage, for the future. It's a massive basket of opportunity. And I think this is where it's not only funding, but it's the interdisciplinary engagement. So it's not just sort of like the Department of Sociology or archaeology, but it's of architecture, it's of arts. One of the things that I've noted in Iraq is that, when it comes to the arts at the moment, we have only two types of artists. Artists that want to be gallery artists, or artists that don't get to the gallery and are teachers who teach more people art. But art is a massive field. There's art in anthropology, there's art in design, it's a massive field. So and you can find that this sort of extension of the horizon of work, you'll find it in the Gulf, you find it all over the world. In Iraq, there's been a lobotomy, a stopping of that continuity that would have been natural, that development. So we have a long way to go, but Iraqis can move very fast once they're allowed to. Maybe one of the problems why we're being stumped. But anyway, so I think there's a lot that we can develop that would engage the young, would engage the crafts, but there's work to do, and we need to work. We need that opportunity.
I see another question from Mihyar. He's asking you to speak about specific projects or programs that can be implemented to improve the situation.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly specific, there are a lot of them. One of them that we're looking at is to develop a network of NGOs, of local heritage documentators, local museums as well, of people engaged with the ecology, with the environment, with the broader spectrum of cultural heritage, which includes the organic and the ecological, to create a network. One of the developments that we have seen, and I note there's a development in called Engage, that is between universities over here. Which university was it? It was Nottingham and very soon in Iraq. There are networks happening. Nahrein network is another one. The VNA is creating a network. There's Ansh, which is an Arab network. What we need is an internal network of people, not just in the academic field, but on the ground, we are proposing something called Ain, Art for Iraq. Then was it Art for Iraq? Yeah, Art for Iraq network. As something that we hope next year that we'll be moving. But I think to create a network is important. Also, not to be forced to reinvent the wheel. We have done a lot of work in the past. We have, for example, the journal Torhados al-Sha'bi, which is a hugely valuable resource of studies, of works, of knowledge that was gathered from the 60s and continued until 2003 and invasion. Then journals of we need to translate these. We need to make them available online. We need to make it available, this knowledge, and to build on it instead of being forced on. This is what's happening with the work. We're always being forced to reinvent, to step back, and then to do. We don't need to do that. We need to have points of reference that we can know what we lost, what they knew, and where we're at, and what can we take further.
I think for me, from the policy perspective, it's very important for approaching government to understand to value the environment, to put a dollar sign on the environment, on the water. Otherwise, they wouldn't understand it. This is how you need to talk to them. And you can't talk to them unless you train people on this subject area. Ecosystem services, evaluating the importance of having reeds. Doesn't mean anything for them having reeds very important in the marshes, because they think reed is just a weed grow there. It doesn't make sense to them. You say that the marshes are very important. They will bring money back to the government. Having a good environment will attract tourists, will make health better. So that is linking to the policy and educating the policy and the government, the higher government, because the people who are making the decision, actually not me and the people, the student or people like me, but they are making the decision. So they need to be trained. They need to be pushed towards evaluating the environment and the education in this matter.
Okay. Are there any other questions from members of our public? No? Okay. Okay, Ms. Wajd.
Lina, you are muted, so we don't hear you.
There's a question from Wajdan that one has to put pressure on international organization in order to put pressure on the Iraqi government. Do you agree with this statement?
For myself, I do agree, but I will tell you the truth that the international organizations spend a lot of money after 2003, but there wasn't enough money for the training of the people. So they didn't leave a legacy. The scientists came and themselves, and this is, I said it many times internationally in different conferences and meetings, they come as a research scientist. They are assisted by Iraqis, and they go and publish papers. With all due respect, sometimes they don't even thank the people who assisted them. They don't include them in the papers, and that is very frustrating, because the Iraqi people that I work with, they told me that, and they said, we are fed up of being assistant and helping, and without even acknowledged of what we did. Most of the papers you see, Japan, Italy, Britain, US spent millions of dollars on the marshes, and you saw few papers or some papers and books, very nice, published, but you rarely see Iraqi names, and there wasn't enough training for the Iraqis themselves. I have also other presentations showing what the international NGOs came and did from the, a goodwill of their hearts, but that wasn't taking into account the culture background of the people. And I spoke with actually some people from the UN who are working in Iraq, and the person was giving me an example. He wanted to apply in Iraq, similar to the Africa, women in Africa, how they help women in Africa. But I said to him, look, you need to look at a culture uniqueness point of view. Women in the Middle East, and especially in the Marsh area, completely different of their background and the way that they interact with men, with their environment, compared to the Africans. So you need to understand first the culture, then you apply the assistant in a way that will help the community.
I don't really have anything to add from that, and I think it's everybody has got things that they need to change and pressure put. What I'm happy to see is that the Western organizations at least are becoming more and more aware of the degree of need for policy change and how that is effective. So we are seeing some change there. Though I'm really worried that due to COVID and the influence of COVID on the economy and idiot sort of things like Brexit, in which there is actually a breaking down of the kind of unity that you have, that Europe and the West has been working so hard since the Second World War to develop. I'm worried about a breakdown of that. So it is serious, and how that will affect the kind of funding, the kind of engagement. Like I said earlier on in my talk, war is profitable for a few people in a few organizations, and it's also profitable for a kind of cheap politics, a populist politics, which is the sort of thing that you find in Iraq and you're finding increasingly in the West. So I think it is really, we need to be attentive, and we need to also, in a way, help the West, help the thing to have that kind of, to understand that, we are connected, and to stop this sort of politics of separation that is happening. And I think that's one of the reasons why cultural heritage is so important. And things like boats, issues that are, or objects or ideas or history that is mutual, that they own as well. I mean, the West, part of the problem has been that they have a tendency to want to own the archaeology because it's part of their history. There's been a separation between. Anyway, that's all. Besides, I think the point of it here, and we're 10 minutes over, so.
Okay. I would like, first of all, to thank all of you who have attended these very two enlightening talks from Professor Nadia and Rashad Salim. They both complement each other. We know that the damage to the environment can also affect the damage towards our built heritage, whether it's archaeological or architectural, or even the nature that we live in. These are very important themes, and they add up, especially to the tangible and intangible heritage, which were discussed in both talks. I am a true believer that us who are present now in the West, we Arabs, we can play a huge role in showing, what our countries are capable of by being vocal, by writing our research and by publishing it, and by being, giving our experiences, since some of us also have lived there. I am aware that, there has been like lots of conflicts. That's why we have networks like Nahrein who help us foster this kind of sustainable development of antiquities and cultural heritage, not only in Iraq, but also in the neighboring regions. These talks were part of a series I forgot to mention by the Nahrein Network and Chatham House. Please join us next week for other talks, which are very interesting. So they usually happen every Thursday. And I hope we will have more fruitful discussions in the future. And I wish everybody a very good evening. And thank you very much for being with us all this long.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mm.